Nestled above Long Island Sound, Connecticut is a land of scenic coastline and pristine waterways. It's been an important center of commerce since colonial times and the home of historic events and people that have helped shape the nation. From the house where Huckleberry Finn was born, to the factory that created the Colt revolver and the M16 assault rifle, and the estate where one of Hollywood's greatest female stars escaped the limelight. History has been made on these shores again and again. This is also a place brimming with myth and legend. From stories about a deadly dog to tales of a haunted lighthouse and to a sleeping giant who may never spill his secrets. Ariel, Connecticut is a journey across a land shaped by innovation and ingenuity. A place where old traditions and new innovations have come together to create a state rich in wealth, institutions, and ideas. It's a land where you're never far from water or dense forest. With a long coastline sheltered by Long Island to the south. The native people called it Long River Place, or Connecticut. The first European settlers discovered, along the calm waters of Long Island Sound, abundant natural harbors. Prosperity was guaranteed, at least for the Europeans. For the native Mohegan Indians, the story is a little different. It starts in tragedy, but ends in a kind of triumph. In the 17th century, white English and Dutch settlers bought up the Mohegans' land and forced them out, leading to a long decline. The Mohegans were also devastated by imported European diseases. By the American Revolution, their population had dwindled from thousands to just 70 people. This glittering building marks a revival of the Mohegan tribe's fortunes. Thanks to proceeds from the Mohegan Sun Casino and Hotel in Uncasville. With 300,000 square feet of gambling space, everything in the design is infused with meaning to the tribe. The centerpiece is the iconic 1,200-room hotel. Its crystal facade and shape are designed to resemble the quartzite once used by Mohegans to make arrowheads. Embracing modern commerce has allowed the Mohegans to honor their dead fittingly. A few miles up the road, in Norwich, a permanent memorial of 13 pillars stands proud on the site of a Mohegan burial ground. Each pillar represents the 13 moons of the Mohegan calendar. Their most famous leader, Chief Uncas, is believed to be buried somewhere in this 3.5-acre park. The tribe fought for years to regain their former burial ground, but it wasn't until 1999 that the Mohegans finally reclaimed the land, buying it from the city of Norwich. Connecticut is justly proud of its schools, Here in Canterbury, in the northeastern corner of the state, was the site of New England's first school for African American girls. When Prudence Crandall founded it in 1832, the school was unpopular with locals, and she faced humiliation, arrest, and a trial that brought her to the state Supreme Court. Her defiance paved the way for others to follow, and in her honor, her former school and home is now called the Prudence Crandall Museum. Jutting out precariously at the mouth of New Haven Harbor stands another testament to Connecticut bravery. At this fort, reconstructed from the original, 19 American soldiers held out against the British during the Revolutionary War. In July 1779, hundreds of redcoats landed nearby and attacked the fort from behind. In spite of overwhelming odds, the plucky soldiers defended the harbor until they ran out of ammunition and made a run for it. A little further east along the shoreline, 2 permanent sentinels stand watch over New London Harbor. 89 feet high and built in 1801, New London Lighthouse is the oldest in the state and the 4th oldest in North America. It cost the staggering sum of $15,000. But for local sailors, it was money well spent. One wrote in the 19th century, "It is of great importance as a leading light for vessels going in and out of the harbor of New London, which, on account of its position and security, is much resorted to during the heavy gales of winter." A short distance away, in the mouth of the harbor, sits the New London Ledge Lighthouse. This striking structure was built in 1909 and designed to look just like the homes of the wealthy residents along the coast. The lighthouse is said to be haunted by the ghost of a former keeper. According to legend, when the keeper's wife ran off, he jumped off the lighthouse and drowned in the cold waters of Long Island Sound. Reports of mysterious occurrences at the lighthouse have emerged ever since. The city of New Haven is a beacon for the nation's learning and a showcase for town planning. At its center is the 16-acre green, with its neat paths radiating out to the historic downtown. Founded in 1638, New Haven was the first town in the U.S. to use a grid system. Many American cities, if not all, have since adopted the same plan design. But it's also a place famous for its natural beauty, earning the nickname the Elm City. It's lined with many massive elms, the remnants of America's first public tree planting program. Taking pride of place in this city of trees is Connecticut's most famous institution, Yale University. The school was founded in nearby Saybrook and moved to New Haven in 1716 after a protracted debate. First called the Collegiate School, Yale was started in 1701 by a group of 10 ministers. The men, all alumni of Harvard, had pooled their books to form the school's first library. By 1718, the college's name was changed in honor of the main benefactor, Elihu Yale. The university's most prominent landmark, Harkness Tower, stands 216 feet tall, and its 44 carillon bells ring out every hour. Yale is the 3rd oldest university in America and is considered one of the most prestigious, with good reason. Since the 1970s, 4 of its alumni have gone on to become President of the United States. Running north from Yale is an even older landmark. This area is known as the land of the sleeping giant. From a distance, you can see a long 2-mile hill that looks like a giant's resting body. Native Americans call this giant Hobbamock, who was put to sleep by a good spirit to stop his destructive urges. The giant's rest has not always been peaceful. He was disturbed by vandals in the early 20th century. And then Judge Willis Cook, whose property included the giant's head, allowed stone quarrying on the land. But public outcry soon put an end to the blasting and led to the creation of Sleeping Giant State Park in 1924. The giant has slept soundly ever since, despite this observation tower being built on his thickly wooded belly. Also in Hamden is an important epicenter of innovation. It was here that inventor Eli Whitney made a key contribution to America's Industrial Revolution. After patent violations kept him from reaping profits from his invention of the cotton gin, in 1798, he signed a government contract to mass-produce 10,000 guns. Whitney harnessed natural power for his factory from the flow of the Mill River and broke new ground by making the weapons with interchangeable parts. Another innovation was creating the pieces by machine instead of by hand. The innovations developed here would ultimately help the industrialized North defeat the South in the Civil War. Connecticut is a land of towers with incredible views. Castle Craig is perched on an inland cliff edge in an area known as the Hanging Hills. The view is commanding, offering the highest vantage point anywhere along the eastern seaboard. The castle was built by a local manufacturer a century ago. Although the origin of its design is unclear, some say it was inspired by an 11th century French tower, others by a 12th century Turkish tower. Looking out, you may catch a glimpse of the infamous Black Dog of the Hanging Hills. The first sighting of this legendary hound, who leaves no footprints and makes no sound, is said to bring joy. But the second sighting supposedly leads to misfortune, and the third is considered an omen of death. Connecticut is a state shaped by its access to the oceans through its rivers and coastline. And its waterways served as major highways for transporting goods in early America. Protected by Long Island Sound, maritime trades thrived. The majestic Connecticut River connected this bustling coastline to the state's inner regions. The state capital of Hartford was settled on the banks of the river in 1623 by Dutch traders. What started as a fort known as the House of Hope soon became a prosperous outpost. One of the town's great success stories continues to this day. Merchants needed insurance to protect their ships and cargo, and Hartford gladly obliged. With its modern skyline of office blocks, it's become known as the insurance capital of America. The Travelers Tower is home to one such insurance company and remains the city's most distinctive landmark. Amazingly, this impressive structure was once the 7th highest building in the world. Today, it's not even the tallest in its own city. Hartford has a long history as a center of democracy. The first written constitution guaranteeing representative government was signed in Connecticut in 1639. As a result, the state earned its nickname the Constitution State. Over 150 years later, Connecticut built its first state house. It's the oldest in the nation and served as the official state capitol building until 1878. Its architect, Charles Bulfinch, went on to help create the Capitol Building in Washington, D.C. Today, it's affectionately referred to as the Old State House and remains one of Hartford's architectural treasures. With Bushnell Park rolling out before it, the new state capitol is a grander affair. Costing a staggering $2.5 million at the time, or $53.5 million in today's money, it's regarded as a perfect example of high Victorian Gothic architecture. Opening for state business in 1879, it's been serving the citizens of Connecticut ever since. Perhaps America's greatest literary figure built his dream home here in Hartford. Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, enlisted an English architect to create this dramatic house. And despite his 3 young daughters running amok, he found time to write The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. The house is now abutted by a museum dedicated to the highs and lows of Twain's life. Although Twain's literary success made him wealthy, bad investments saddled him with debt. He left his Hartford home for good in 1891. He wrote of his beloved city that, of all the beautiful towns it has been my fortune to see, this is the chief of all. Away from the peaceful residential areas lies the most famous gun factory in the world. Learning industrial-scale manufacturing from Eli Whitney, Samuel Colt built his own gun empire here in an area of Hartford later named Coltsville. His distinctive domed armory is the centerpiece of a factory that made the first revolvers and the M16 assault rifle. The firearms made in Hartford have played a vital role in U.S. history for over 150 years. Colt used his vast fortune to build a nearby mansion, Armsmere, considered the greatest Hartford residence of its day. He constructed the palatial Italian-style villa as a home for his new wife, Elizabeth Jarvis. After Colt's death in 1862, Elizabeth was one of the richest women in the world. She used her fortune to become a dedicated patron of the arts, collecting and donating many great works over the next 4 decades. The historic houses of Wethersfield are more modest, but no less important in the state's history. Ranging in age from early to mid-18th century, they typify early settler architecture. Simple, efficient clapboard designs. Here at Joseph Webb House in 1781, General George Washington convened a 5-day military conference that would ultimately seal America's independence. At the Battle of Yorktown later in the year, the young nation finally defeated the British. The military conference here at Wethersfield was clearly time well spent. A short way down the Connecticut River floats a unique moving landmark. For this man and his car, the $3 toll to cross the Connecticut River is both time-saving and historic. The Rocky Hill Glastonbury Ferry has been in business since 1655, making it the nation's oldest continually operating ferry. Back then, the ferryman used poles to push his boat across the 1,000-foot stretch of water. Later on, a horse walking a treadmill did the hard work, and later still came the advent of steam. Today, diesel power has replaced centuries of toil. Crossing the river here shaves 8 miles off his journey and allows time to savor the view. Connecticut may be known for its industry and innovation, but some days in this state shouldn't be allowed to go by without pausing for a rest. That rest could come from the shade of one of the state's many trees, or perhaps one in particular. The Pinchot sycamore, the largest in New England, is named after Gifford Pinchot, the father of American conservation. Its canopy stretches 140 feet, half a football field, and it's at least 2 centuries old. A small town with a big reputation, Litchfield, in the northwest of the state, is home to another important first. A judge named Tapping Reeve devised a series of lectures on law and established in 1784 the first law school in the country. Many of the nation's most prominent politicians studied here, including Thomas Jefferson's Vice President Aaron Burr, 28 senators, and 3 Supreme Court justices. It closed in 1833. Further east, another Connecticut tower played a part in U.S. presidential history. Rising from a natural wonder known as Talcott Mountain, the 165-foot-tall Hubline Tower was built as a summer home by a German-American businessman who modeled it after castles in his homeland. Its owner's heritage caused problems at the beginning of World War I, when rumors flew that the tower was being used to send messages to German ships. To halt this speculation, Hubline offered the federal government use of the property. They declined, but the rumors quickly died down. In 1952, a group of prominent citizens gathered here to pressure a renowned general into running for president. Dwight D. Eisenhower accepted and was sworn into office the following year. Today, over 100,000 people a year visit the tower. Connecticut's small creeks and streams were once dotted with covered bridges, but today, the West Cornwall Bridge is one of only 3 original structures that remain. Built in 1864, it was designed by Ithiel Town, one of America's first architects and another Connecticut native. His design, crisscrossing pieces of wood that form a lattice, allowed the bridge to hold more weight. Even so, the bridge has received a little help over the years. A hidden steel deck was added beneath it in 1973. A break in the forest reveals harvest time for a traditional New England crop. Pumpkins have been grown for food by humans for generations, but these look set for jack-o'-lanterns. There are many varieties, but the Connecticut field pumpkin is the most popular type for Halloween, thanks to its picture book color and size. In a land rich in ghost stories, perhaps the most chilling concerns a lost Connecticut village, Dudleytown, also known as the Village of the Damned. Hidden in this forest, just south of Coltsfoot Mountain, are ruins not marked on most maps. Legend has it that a curse followed the Dudley family from England after one of their number was beheaded for plotting against King Henry VIII. Widespread suicides, mysterious disappearances, and general mayhem followed the family to the town they settled in Connecticut. By the early 1900s, it had been abandoned to the forest. The current owners of the property have designated it a nature reserve and tried to ward people off. But some still find their way here in search of old legends and ghosts. Here at Lime Rock Park, a Hollywood star satisfied his passion for driving. Too small to be a major track, its beautiful location and history places it firmly in the hearts of racing fans, including the late Paul Newman. He cut his teeth at Lime Rock, learning the skills that would take him to second place in the Le Mans endurance race. Opened in 1957 by Jim Vale, there can be no racing on this track on Sundays because it's across the street from a church. But it keeps busy, even though this means it can only hold a few big weekend events a year. Newman was the most famous resident of the coastal town of Westport until his passing in 2008. But his legacy lives on. His habit of making salad dressing for friends and family sparked an idea. The Newman's Own brand was founded in 1982 with his friend Aaron Hotchner. So far, over $250 million has been given to charity from the sale of dressings, sauces, and lemonade. Such selflessness would not be lost on the nuns of the Abbey of Regina Laudis in Bethlehem. When a Connecticut industrialist donated some land to a French and an American nun, they fashioned their abbey's main structure from an old factory building. The abbey has since expanded in size and in people. One of the abbey's most famous residents is Dolores Hart, a movie actress turned Catholic nun. By the age of 25, Hart had delivered Elvis Presley's first on-screen kiss and was on her way to stardom. Then in 1963, Hart left Hollywood to become a Benedictine nun within the peaceful confines of the Abbey. While the glamour may be a distant memory, her need to perform isn't. The Abbey's choir has released several CDs of Gregorian chants, and its programs include summer theater workshops. A world away, but in the same state, the neat banks of submarines at Groton signal a deadly intent. As a gateway to the Atlantic, Connecticut plays a vital part in the nation's defense. On the banks of the Thames River, Groton is home port to 16 attack submarines and an impressive naval museum. The USS Nautilus is more than an exhibit. It was the first nuclear submarine in the world. With its keel laid by President Truman in 1954, this groundbreaking vessel embarked on a career of many firsts, including the first crossing of the North Pole by ship. The ship was finally decommissioned in 1980 and brought here in 1986. While submarines operate miles out at sea, the Thames River played its own part in the history of U.S. warfare. At the Battle of Groton Heights on September 6, 1781, Fort Griswold was attacked by a British force led by America's most infamous traitor, Connecticut native Benedict Arnold. The marks of the original fort can clearly be seen from the air. Arnold was given detailed plans of the building by another turncoat. With such knowledge, victory was almost guaranteed. But the stationed soldiers refused to surrender without a fight, and there were heavy casualties on both sides. Eventually, Arnold's forces won. Just across the Thames stands the more impressive Fort Trumbull. But back in 1781, it was only a three-sided rampart and garrisoned by just 23 men. Arnold took it easily. Missing out on one conflict, Fort Trumbull finally had a military role, over 150 years later. During the Cold War, it served as a top-secret laboratory for the Navy. Today, the fort complex contains a museum with over 225 years of military history on display. A flotilla of small sailing boats takes safe harbor in one of Connecticut's jewels, Mystic Seaport, the Museum of America and the Sea. This is the country's largest maritime museum, and many sailing ships from America's past have been brought here, including the Charles W. Morgan, the nation's only surviving wooden whaling ship, and the Joseph Conrad, named for the author of Heart of Darkness, a novel that would later inspire Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. The museum also houses a 19th century fishing village. Although most of the houses are authentic, they were moved here from various locations around New England. Waterbury was once famous for making clocks, so it's only fitting that the largest timepiece in New England resides here. This enormous clock tower was a late addition to plans for the Waterbury train station. In 1909, the president of the New York, New Haven, and Hartford Railroad had gone to Italy with his wife. He was so entranced by the Torre di Mancia of Siena that upon his return, he decided to create a replica of that tower here. He enlisted the same architectural firm that created Ellis Island's Great Hall and the original Penn Station in New York. He spared no expense to add the 245-foot tall structure and the 16-foot clock. In Connecticut, you are never far from water. But its largest and most famous lake was actually made by human hands. This 16-mile-long body of water was created by the Connecticut Light and Power Company and is used to generate hydroelectric power for the area. Back in 1928, the lake project cost a total of $1 million, which is how much some of the homes on its manufactured shoreline are now worth. Beneath the surface, divers can still see old roads, houses, farm implements, and Model Ts abandoned when the workers left the area. In its early days, the lake was known by many names, but Candlewood was the one that stuck after the nearby mountain. Evocative names are everywhere in Connecticut, and perhaps none more so than Lillanoa Lake, along the headwaters of the Housatonic River. It's named after one half of a tale of doomed love. Accounts say Lillanoa had rescued a lost white man in the forest and fallen for him. The young lovers eventually convinced her father, an Indian chief, to let them marry. But first, the prospective groom left to pay a last visit to his people. When the young man didn't return soon, Lillanoa's father arranged his daughter's marriage to a young man of the tribe. Distraught, Lillanoa took a canoe out in the Housatonic River and tossed away her paddle, barreling towards certain death in the rapids. Suddenly, she saw her beloved calling out to her, and he dove into the raging waters to save her. In their final embrace, the couple disappeared into the falls. Legend has it that their recovered bodies were still locked in each other's arms. Hydroelectric dams have eliminated the actual falls, but the gorge and its modern bridge are now named Lover's Leap in their honor. Back in the 17th century, parts of southwestern Connecticut were claimed by the neighboring New York colony. New York finally gave up its claim to the region, leaving Connecticut with several key cities, including Greenwich, founded in 1665. More recently, Greenwich's combination of New England charm and New York proximity has helped make it one of the state's most desirable places to live. With the highest median household income in the nation, Connecticut's southwestern shoreline is sometimes called the Gold Coast. One of the most exclusive communities in this very exclusive town is here in Belle Haven. In 1975, this neighborhood was the site of a notorious murder when 15-year-old Martha Moxley was found beaten to death with a golf club. The crime remained unsolved for many years, until the 1990s, when interest in the case picked up again. Police returned to their original suspect, Michael Skakel. In 2002, Skakel was finally found guilty of the crime and sentenced to 20 years in prison. While Connecticut has many wealthy towns, the state's largest, Bridgeport, is only just beginning to recover from the loss of heavy industry in the 1970s and 80s. Every day, thousands commute the 60 or so miles to New York for work. The city has never been short on character. However, one such former resident certainly knew how to draw a crowd. Some called P.T. Barnum the greatest showman, others a marketing genius. But there's no denying that the man who has been quoted as saying, "There's a sucker born every minute," put Bridgeport on the map. This curious building houses his museum, chronicling a career that involved showcasing Siamese twins, an alleged mermaid, and a midget named Tom Thumb. Barnum lived to the ripe old age of 80, and it was only after most people would have considered retirement that he made his most lasting contribution. A circus called P.T. Barnum's Traveling Museum, Menagerie, Caravan, and Hippodrome. Near Bridgeport, a strange runway reveals the products of one of Connecticut's great success stories. Igor Sikorsky founded the aircraft company that bore his name in 1925. Originally a maker of fixed-wing aircraft, Sikorsky invented the first mass-produced helicopter in 1942 and changed aviation history forever. Today, this factory makes the Black Hawk helicopter for the U.S. military. Their latest models go through practice runs over the Connecticut countryside. Sikorsky died at home in Easton, Connecticut in 1972. Without him, aerial America might never have been possible. Known as the Eiffel Tower of Long Island Sound, the Faulkner's Island Lighthouse still stands proudly more than 2 centuries after it was built. The lighthouse was commissioned by President Thomas Jefferson because of ships being wrecked on their way to and from Guilford. Congress authorized its construction at the price of $6,000, or almost $120,000 today. But the lighthouse almost had a very short lifespan. When British troops landed here during the War of 1812, the keeper feared they might destroy the tower. But the British soldiers knew they needed the lighthouse to sail in and out of port safely, and asked only that the light keep burning here. In recent years, the only threat to the lighthouse has been Mother Nature. The island has had a stone wall added to help stop erosion. At the intersection of Long Island Sound and the Connecticut River lies Old Saybrook, the oldest town on the shoreline. It was also the site of Connecticut's first English fort. For years, residents of this close-knit coastal community used to see an old woman biking through town. She was such a regular sight that most never gave her a second look, even though she was one of the most famous actresses of all time, Katharine Hepburn. Her family first summered here in 1912. When the original house was swept away in a 1938 hurricane, it was rebuilt, this time in brick. During her years as a Hollywood celebrity, Hepburn often came here to escape for long weekends. Sometimes with guests like Spencer Tracy or Howard Hughes. When she got older, she came to stay in Old Saybrook for good. And this was where she died, at the age of 96. Her 8,300 square foot house has been sold, but she donated 4 acres of beachfront property to the public to be used as a nature sanctuary. Before Hepburn became a star, another Connecticut actor, William Gillette, built Gillette Castle in East Haddam. He was the son of an important Hartford family and earned his big break from neighbor Mark Twain, who recommended him for a part in his play, The Gilded Age. Gillette built this eccentric dream home after his retirement. He liked to spy on his guests, including Albert Einstein and Charlie Chaplin, using mirrors from his bedroom. Since he had no heirs, he stated only that his castle should not fall into the hands of some blithering saphead who has no conception of where he is or with what surrounded. It was ultimately bought by the state of Connecticut and turned into a popular public park. Sitting off the coast of Brantford are the Thimble Islands. There are about 200 of them, but the exact number depends on how high the tide is when they're being counted. Most are very small and easily covered, and fewer than 30 are large enough to be occupied. The islands didn't earn their name from being as small as thimbles, but from the thimbleberry, a type of blackberry that once grew all over here. By their very nature, the islands are extremely private, and there are no hotels or stores around. In fact, there are fewer than 100 homes on all the islands, many of them Victorian cottages, built in the early 1900s. These quaint summer homes usually pass from one generation to the next. But several islands are so exclusive that they have just a single residence. The privacy and exclusivity of these homes have made them highly prized, resulting in heated bidding wars. The trophy of the group is a 1902 mansion on the 12-acre Rogers Island. In 1980, it was on the market for $1.8 million. In 1985, for $3 million. Then, in 2003, it was sold again for $22 million, almost 8 times as much. At that price, the property should at least come with the promise of hidden treasure. But alas, Captain Kidd is rumored to have hidden his loot on Money Island, a mile to the southeast. Or was it High Island? The stories vary. Horse Island is the largest of the Thimble chain and remains an ecological study center for Yale. From its islands to its mainland, Connecticut is a state that continually redefines itself. To see Connecticut by air is to see its rich history, quiet beauty, and lasting monuments of its steady inhabitants. Home to inventors and writers, wealthy merchants, and their eccentric children. Ancestral lands to native inhabitants and Puritan values. Ancient whalers and modern seafarers. It has long been and continues to be a steady leader in America's march toward a brighter future.